Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Barbell Mamas podcast. Christina here, and I'm so excited actually to be, I guess I say that every single time. Here's a tick that I have because I'm always excited to be doing these interviews and doing this podcast. I have just been really enjoying getting information and education out to everybody through this medium. And so I'm pretty sure that's like my nervous tick or like my entry line thing that I'm so excited. So you're going to expect that from me. But today I get to talk to you a little bit about a big person in the CrossFit space. This is the first time I'm recording a live episode, kind of a one-on-one episode, since I was down in Vermont with HWPO for their Bump Sweat event. It was so great. Sammy is due right around the games, Matt Fraser's partner, and they are just such a wonderful group of humans. And it was just so fun seeing all these pregnant people moving their bodies and then able to answer a lot of their questions about exercise and pelvic floor health and all those types of things. So it was really, really fun. And so I can't wait to keep collaborating with that crew. So today I thought that we would talk a little bit about Tia Clair Toomey's journey. I'm going to put a disclosure on this that I do not know Tia. I am not in her inner circle. I am not her pelvic floor physical therapist. I am just an outsider who is passionately and kind of obsessively watching what she is doing. And I think that her decisions that she's made through her pregnancy and into her postpartum journey are challenging a lot of people's beliefs or making some people feel uncomfortable. And so I think this is a really great chance for us to talk about that and what we know about research, what we know about elite level athletes, and kind of really take a deep dive into it. So I'm pretty excited. So first off, if you do not know who Tia Clair Toomey is, she is the GOAT in the CrossFit space. She is the most decorated individual athlete in the history of the sport. She has won 6 consecutive championships, CrossFit Games championships, and directly after the CrossFit Games in 2022, she found out that she was expecting their first child, their little girl, Willow. It was funny, she had talked about how she thought that she was going through adrenal fatigue. After the games, most of these athletes are going to bring their training volume way down. They're going to try and recover their bodies from peaking for the games, and they tend to put on a little bit of weight. And so Tia didn't think much about that, but was really tired and was going to the doctor trying to figure out what was going on. And she ended up having this positive pregnancy test. And she continued to train throughout her pregnancy. And this is what created a couple of stirs. There was 2 individual events that, or kind of instances that she had that kind of caused the internet to blow up. And I want to kind of talk about them and get your all's opinion and have a conversation about her choices throughout pregnancy. First thing that we need to really talk about is the fact that she is an elite level athlete. Exercising in CrossFit is her job. And it is what gets her sponsorships. It is part of the Proven platform. It's been having her on it. It is her and Shane's business. A lot of people were saying, this isn't the time and it's not worth it. But we wouldn't say that to anybody else if they were going to their job, right? If they had a job that was really physical, like being a nurse, for example, and she had to do a lot of transfers with patients, we wouldn't say that this isn't the time to be a nurse because that's just not financially feasible. And it doesn't make sense in terms of our thoughts about pregnant individuals in just the job space. We may make some modifications and we might change some of our work duties, but we wouldn't tell people that they should not be exercising or they should not be working. And so that's kind of number one. We have to recognize that this is Tia's job. And so as she was going through her pregnancy, she really wasn't that open about what she was doing. And I think she created just like these kind of snapshots of what she was doing. So we don't know what her support team was like. I assume that she had, a pelvic floor physical therapist and a physician or a midwife or a birth provider of some sort that was helping to guide her and make decisions for her. The two videos that she posted that really created a stir in the comment section, the first one was her doing just a cardio piece. There were two aspects of that. Number one, she looked like she was going at a pretty high intensity, and she was doing a ski erg where you could see some coning across her midline, and the internet erupted. So a lot of people were saying, I see that you're coning. I'm concerned for your core. I don't want you to have diastasis recti postpartum. And, she is now, I think, 7 or 8 weeks postpartum at the time of me recording this. And so now we can kind of have some informed decisions about this. And we can talk about some of the research. We don't have research either way to say that avoiding coning during pregnancy protects you from developing diastasis recti postpartum. This is important because a lot of people speak very confidently about the fact that we need to avoid coning. Having that diastasis recti, or that lengthening out or stretching of the linea alba, which is that six-pack line, happens in every single pregnancy towards the third trimester, and for some people even earlier. That is a beautiful mechanism that our body has created in order for us to be able to make room for baby. When we are pelvic floor PTs and I am working with you, I'm going to try and minimize that coning. When I minimize that coning, what I'm trying to do is get all of your core muscles working together to the best of their ability, with you being so far along in your pregnancy, to make you stronger, make you feel stronger with different movements. It is not that I am trying to prevent damage. I am not trying to prevent you from ruining your core, which is what I get messages about all of the time from really scared people who've been told these types of messages. I am trying to keep you as strong as possible in your core during pregnancy and postpartum for you to feel good and feel supported in your movements. We have research that those who have diastasis recti tend to be weaker than those that aren't. And I did an episode on returning to gymnastics, and we talked a lot about some of these myths and misconceptions, and how our goal really is to keep our core strong so that we can feel strong in that postpartum period, or it doesn't take us as long potentially to get back in the postpartum period. So that was number one. And actually, Tia did a vlog, which obviously I've been watching all of her vlogs. She did a vlog that said, people were talking about that doming and coning in the comment section of my videos. And I realized that I had that before. And I also realized that Willow has it now. And so she was kind of going through her own process, because we see this all the time, for example, in individuals, our older men who have gained a lot of central weight. A lot of them have that coning or that diastasis recti because of the amount of fat that they have in their abdominal wall. Can create a bit of lengthening of the linea alba and that six-pack muscle, and they don't tend to worry about it. I've had clients call it a party trick. I didn't know that that was something that I could get stronger or I could improve. And so it really only is villainized in the pregnant and postpartum space, which I think is really interesting. And then the second kind of series of videos where Tia was maybe really challenging beliefs was when she was doing the open workouts. Context here, she is the alternate for the proven team, and the proven team is going to the CrossFit Games. And this is important because if one of their athletes got hurt at 4 or 5 months postpartum, when she goes in August, when the games is, if they got hurt, she would be stepping in. And she knew that during the open, and they did that intentionally just in case. Is that kind of putting a lot of pressure on her? Yes. Is she an athlete that wants that pressure? Probably. But she was doing all of the open workouts as prescribed, or in the CrossFit space, we call it RX. And she did that so that she could accumulate as many points as possible. This also, she had said during her pregnancy that she wanted to return to high level competition after baby. And so she was trying to create a position where she was still high up in the rankings and kind of set herself up for success. And so she did all of these open workouts RX'd. So the coning came up again in the burpee pull-up workout. So there was a workout in the CrossFit Open that was burpee pull-ups and shuttle runs, and then followed by a max thruster. And so she did the burpee pull-up higher, actually. The pull-up bar was higher than it needed to be, but she coned at the top. She was continuing to run because for her it felt good, and she did a thruster at 195 pounds. So, and she was like mad that she couldn't do the 200. Shane told her that she should stop. And again, the internet erupted saying, like, is this the time? Should she be doing this? And I think there's a couple things for us to speak to about this. And then when she got into the quarterfinal workouts, she started modifying things just because, she couldn't do those movements without baby bump getting into the way. So a couple things that we should be talking about. Number one is that the open workouts are a snapshot in time and do not represent what she was doing the rest of her pregnancy. She talked a lot about how this was the only time that she had really exposed herself to that load, with the thruster, and she did the 155 snatch. And, she said that she hadn't touched anything close to that throughout her pregnancy because it just didn't feel good. She said squats felt good, but other things didn't. And so she is in this social media highlight reel, and we are always going to say, that if you have goals or you have things that you are doing and you want to send it on those workouts, high intensity training is not bad. The rebound fatigue is going to be probably enormous. It is for everybody after an open workout, but especially if you're 7 or 8 months pregnant when you're doing them. And so she made that informed decision to send it on those workouts, and that does not represent what she was doing the majority of the time or the rest of the time. The second thing is, like I mentioned earlier, she had decided that she was going to try and return to high-level competition. She wanted to win the CrossFit Games in her postpartum period. What your goals are during your pregnancy and into your postpartum journey matter. Our elite athletes are in a very challenging position. Your fertility window and your athletic window directly overlap. That is really hard to figure out what you are going to do and what that looks like. If you are trying to stay at an elite level, then you are probably going to push it a lot more during your pregnancy to maintain as much of not just your core strength, but your leg strength and your upper body strength, because you are going to take a dip in that postpartum period. But if your baseline is 300 pounds and your dip is 250, that's going to make a big difference than if you keep your baseline to 100 and then you drop to 50. And so these elite level athletes are going to try and keep their bodies as conditioned as possible. And then we also know that in the postpartum period, our elite level athletes tend to come back to exercise sooner, again, because it is their job to start coming back to exercise. And they're going to push the intensity of that exercise probably more than most people will. And that is okay. That is not a bad decision. We do not have anything that would say that they are going to somehow cause more damage or ruin their pelvic floor. And if you're watching the video version of this, I'm kind of going into air quotes here. And so she is kind of trying to keep up and maintain as much of that as possible. And that is okay. And she also has timelines in that postpartum period. So I think this really kind of highlights why that might matter, right? Because if you are going to retire after, then you may feel a little bit better about scaling it back, or you may choose to scale it back, or there may be aspects of your pregnancy that make it that you have to scale back. You may be really sick, or you may have other kids at home that are making you exhausted, and training that hard is not helpful for your other family dynamics. Like, all of these things come into account, and Tia was making the decisions for her. And so all of these things are kind of coming up in her pregnancy. Then D-Day happens. She was doing a sprinting video, kind of went into labor that night, and then had baby Willow. This is just speculation. She posted a Father's Day video, and Shane, her husband, had a surgical cap on. So I think that she had a C-section. She hasn't really talked about that. She talked about how labor was a lot harder than she thought. And, labor is one of the hardest workouts you're ever going to do. And it is a marathon. And it is also so transformative. But she kind of didn't really disclose a lot of the details of her birth story. So we're just kind of speculating. And then she also, in a postpartum training blog, had mentioned that snatching didn't really feel great, but sumo deadlift felt awesome. So if you have had a vaginal delivery, sumo deadlift, because your legs are in a wider position and there's more of a stretch on an adductor, your adductors, tends to be a position where individuals can feel really vulnerable and open. And so after a vaginal delivery, it tends to be, for a lot of people, one of the last movements they get back to, or they get back to it a little bit slower. But for Tia, she felt really good, but she did not feel good snatching. And bar contact is right very close to that incision scar for individuals after a C-section. So again, we're just kind of speculating, and you don't know what caused that C-section. We've talked a lot about, C-section recovery in a previous podcast episode. But something that we would consider if she was, for example, my client, we were trying to progress her back. So if she had had a C-section, I might take her gymnastics movements a little bit slower, but her strength movements a little bit quicker. And so in the first 6 weeks, you saw that Tia was back to running. She was doing repeats with the proven team. She had sumo deadlifted 275 for 3. And she had not touched those weights in so long. She takes my max and just does it for a triple, no big deal. And it's without a belt. And she was like, oh, that feels okay. So unbelievable amount of strength that she was able to maintain. And that kind of also makes me think that she potentially had a C-section. So a lot of people are kind of comparing their postpartum journeys. And it is different. Did she have a trial of labor? Was there any stretch injury on the pelvic floor before a C-section was performed? Did she have a C-section? I'm just speculating. All of those things are going to really dictate how she feels. And so there's a couple of things that I want to highlight in her postpartum period so far. One is, I think she's doing amazing. And I know other people may have different thoughts and feelings. And a lot of people, when they're watching her, especially if they've given birth before, it can be challenging to watch somebody progress a lot faster, or from the outside, make it look like they felt so much better or have it so much together than you do or you did. And this can be really challenging because we can't really compare ourselves to a professional athlete. Even on if Tia had the flu and was throwing up mid-workout, she still would beat me on anything, whether she was pregnant, postpartum, or not. Her fitness is just so much higher than all of us who are watching her. Also, every pregnancy is different, and every person's thoughts and feelings are different. And the way that people show up online may not even be a true representation of how they are doing. She may seem like, oh my gosh, she's just getting back to training, but she's still trying to figure out how to be a new mom. She talked about how mentally her body wants to push, but physically she's not there, how she is trying to figure out what their work schedule looks like so that Willow isn't at the gym all of the time. And it's going to change, right? Willow is a newborn right now and she's sleeping more, but what is her training going to look like when those wake windows increase and their naps are shorter? All of those things they're going to have to take into account and try and figure out, and they will. And if she's going to, if she has anything going on, I think that she may not be open. She's very kind of close to the chest. And again, that's fine. She doesn't need to share that with a million people. And we don't need to compare, because even within ourselves, every pregnancy is going to be different. And our goals are not to make it to the CrossFit Games. And so we don't need to make that comparison. And I think that reflection needs to happen if you are getting triggered by her progressions postpartum. We also don't have the research either way, again, to talk about what is too fast. And I think this is important. You know, we have 2 research studies now that have looked at individuals who got back to exercise 2 to 3 weeks postpartum versus 5 to 6. And both of them have said that going back to moderate intensity aerobic training, so cardio at moderate intensity at 2 to 3 weeks, did not cause an increase in pelvic floor issues. And so we can start having that movement. Now, we don't have any research in strength training. Our car seats are heavy enough. I was picking up my 35-pound toddler when I was newly postpartum with my son because I'm a mom and that just is part of momming. And I think that that is also important. And people are saying, like, you're going to do something bad because we don't have a lot of research either way to say if that is true. And so we want to be careful about the well-meaning, hopefully well-meaning advice that we are giving. When it comes to those comments, the second thing that I want to mention is that it is not actually being helpful to give her that advice because you do not know her story. You have not gone into her world, and all it might do is make her afraid when she potentially doesn't need to be afraid. She has a community around her that is going to give her advice if she needs it or if she wants it. Giving unsolicited advice with a fear-focused message is just not the way. And we have to be mindful of that. I remember, so I was pregnant with my son, and I did a video of reasons why we might not snatch towards the end of pregnancy. And I was talking about the different bar paths. I was like 37 or 38 weeks pregnant, so I was really far along. And I had gotten to posting it when he had already been born. And somebody commented, when the baby dies, don't come crying to the internet. And he was already born, but I got so mad about that because, oh my goodness, what if something did happen? What if there was a complication? We don't have any data to suggest that vigorous intensity exercise leads to stillborn birth or fetal complications. None. We actually do have research that it is okay to exercise at a vigorous intensity in the 3rd trimester. You might be pregnant for a little bit longer, like a day or 2 longer than those who exercise at moderate intensity. That is the research that we have. And so you are sending misinformation that may make a person blame themselves if a complication did happen. And that is not fair. And that goes outside of well-meaning advice. And this leads me to number 3, is if she does disclose that she is struggling with leaking or she's having problems with her core or something happens, we are not going to shame her for that or give the undoubtable "I told you so" that people are going to have. You know, as a pelvic floor PT, I am not afraid of a person leaking. When I'm trying to get somebody back to exercise after pregnancy, I'm actually trying to find where their thresholds are. So it's not, do you have any leaking? It's when does that leaking come up? Or when do you start feeling symptoms? I want to know, because when I know what those are, I know where your threshold is and where your ceiling is, and I want to try and increase that ceiling. So we do not want, if she decides to say, or if she develops, for example, leaking, and people are like, see, told you went to work too early. No, because she may have been totally fine and then just pushed a little bit too hard one workout and started to leak, right? We would never say that for somebody who did a really hard workout and then developed some knee pain. We would never say, well, told you so, shouldn't have done that, way to go, you did something wrong, now you've just ruined your knee forever. That's not helpful, and that's not true. And so we are going to try and take the same considerations for Tia and say, you know, her journey is going to have ups and downs. Athletes experience injuries at higher rates because they're pushing their bodies to extremes. We just hope that she has that support and that people on the internet are a little bit nicer about what she is experiencing. Okay, final thing that I want to mention about Tia's postpartum journey so far is that her rectus muscles have already approximated. So kind of bringing this full circle from the first thing I talked about with the coning during pregnancy, at least in her N of 1 case study, you can see that her resting tone of her rectus muscles have already approximated, especially above the belly button, at the belly button, and a little bit below. What I mean by that is that you can see as she's doing strict pull-ups in her videos that her six-pack muscles are back together. So her doing coning or having coning issues, again, I'm doing the air quotes, her exercising with coning, at least for her, did not cause persistent issues with diastasis recti postpartum. I think that can be a bias check for some people. It's definitely a gut check. It's definitely something that I said, Christina 5 years ago would definitely have said, ooh, you should avoid that. And like maybe my language my tone or my face would have been kind of squinched up and I would have been doing a lot of nonverbal communication about my body language. And that is very different than my messaging now as we learn more and more. And so it's kind of this cool, like, let's watch and see how Tia does in terms of how fast she can get back to her postpartum, how fast she can get back some postpartum conditioning. And then, maybe it just makes us a little bit less afraid. Maybe it makes us a little bit more confident in how we're moving. And I think this could be something that, one, I am just so excited to see how Tia does. She's such an incredible athlete. And I just can't wait to see how she does in motherhood. It is so challenging to be a mom. We are seeing so many CrossFit athletes who are still competing at a really high level. Cara Saunders, before she just got pregnant with baby 2, Amy Thorisdottir, Ariel Lowen, and now Tia, that they're coming back and are doing incredible things. And they don't have the same 24 hours anymore that the other athletes do, where they're just focusing on recovering. That's just not real life with kids at home, but it makes you adaptable and it makes you able to manage some of these challenges sometimes. And I'm just so here for it. So Tia, if you listen to this, which I know you probably won't, but we are on your side. We are so pumped. We cannot wait to see how you do in your CrossFit journey, whatever that may be. It could be winning the CrossFit Games. It could be something else. But I think that you're an incredible example of being a mom athlete. And I hope that the overwhelming messaging for you has been positive and not trying to be negative. All right. I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you agree with me? Do you not? I know we're just outsiders looking in, but it's always fun to kind of have these conversations. And I really do think that Tia's journey kind of shows a lot of the biases or, the fear focusing messages that we can sometimes see in the pregnant postpartum space. And it's a really good time to start challenging them. All right. Hope you all are having a wonderful week. Until next time, I'll see you all later.